Workspaces are one of those hidden gems in Luminar FLEX. Simply put, a workspace loads a predefined set of filters that are tailored to a specific type of photography or a specific processing strategy. Now, this not only streamlines your workflow by putting the precise filters you need right at your fingertips, it also provides a guided workflow, providing a logical flow for developing an image. Now, out of the box, Luminar FLEX has 8 pre-built workspaces, and each of these are designed for a specific type or style of photography. Let's take a look at some of my favorites. We'll start with Image Aware. But before I get going, I do want to clarify the difference between a look and a workspace. If you've played around with looks, when you apply a look, it applies a set of filters, but those filters already have been adjusted, so it changes the look of your image. A workspace loads a series of filters, but there's no adjustment set. They're all basically neutral. What I really like about the Image Aware workspace is it loads all of the AI filters that have been created by Skylum, as well as the Image Aware filters, so I can quickly take an image and make it pop. Let's go ahead and go through the workflow of Image Aware. Now, when I apply it, the first thing I usually like to do is boost my Accent AI, and that makes the image pop. There's sky in this filter, so let's go ahead and enhance that. I want this to have a little bit of a sunset look, so we'll use golden hour. No trees, so I can skip foliage enhancer. I want this to really pop. I love the colors here, so we'll add a little bit of vibrance. And there's really nice detail in this image, so let's add a little bit of structure to it. And that gives me that nice sharp edge. Now, when I work with structure, I do like to click on the image and bring it to 100%, so I can see exactly what is happening when I increase the structure. And as we scroll down, I can work with brilliance and warmth. If I wanted to warm this image up a little bit or increase the vividness, I think it's pretty good the way it is. And then there's advanced contrast, and that allows me to fix areas, for instance, where the whites might be overblown. I'm going to click to bring this back to fit the screen and take my highlights and use the advanced contrast. And you can see here, if I bring it hard to the right, that it starts recovering some of those blown out highlights. I like the way this is working, and I like the workflow. I think the image could be a little bit brighter, so I'm going to scroll back to the top, just try the Accent AI 2.0 filter, see if that brings it up a little bit. And what's happened is when I increase the vibrance is that the saturation makes the image look a little bit darker. So I have a couple of options here. I can either bring the vibrance back down, or I can modify this workspace by adding another filter. And that's the great thing about workspaces, is you're not locked in necessarily to the filters from the predefined workspace. Think of it as a starting point. As a matter of fact, you notice I didn't even use the foliage enhancer. I have several filters I can choose from to bring up the luminance in this image. I'm going to go with the tone filter. And inside of the tone filter is the smart tone slider. And by moving it to the right, I can open up my shadows without really blowing out my highlights. That's pretty good, but let me give exposure a little bit of a tweak and shadows a little bit of a tweak. So very easily, I've been able to go down through this workspace and go from this image here to this image here. Completely different look and feel. It's very much a color pop image. Let's explore a couple of the other workspaces. I'm going to scroll back to the top, and to switch between a workspace, it's as simple as clicking on the drop-down menu and choosing the one that you want to work with. Let's switch from Image Aware to Intensify. You'll notice when I switched from Image Aware to Intensify, all of my Image Aware filters were deleted and new filters were put in their place, so my image was reset to the state it was when I brought it into the plugin. Now, what I like about the Intensify workspace is it helps me bring out the details and contrast in my shadows and my highlights in an image. So as always, I love the Accent AI filter. I'm going to bring that over to the right. It neutralizes this a little bit. I want to add a little bit of structure so I get that detail. And once again, I click on my image to bring it to 100%. I'm going to add a little bit more to my details in both the small and medium area. But I'm going to take my large details, such as in the sky, and move that to the left and actually soften those. As we go down, there's the option to add microstructure, which really adds that fine details to my image. And like we saw before in the Image Aware workspace, I have advanced contrast. And if you recall, I use that to recover some of the highlights in my sky. So let's go ahead and again bring that across, and I'm getting a nice rich sky. If I bring it too far to the right, you notice that I'm creating too much shadow on her, so I'm going to kind of split the difference. In this round of processing, I'm not going to worry about saturation and vibrance because I don't want something that pops so much. But I do want to take advantage of the vignette because I really want to focus the viewer's eyes on her and not necessarily the background. So I'll simply bring my vignette down to the left and bring up the feather. I can place the center of my vignette directly over her. And I'm going to bring in a little bit of inner light that's going to brighten her up a bit. And now let's bring the amount down. So this is a completely different look than I had before, and I use this guided workflow. Let's see the before and the after. Another great feature of Workspaces is the ability to set one of them as a default. Let's say my primary focus is editing portraits, and I want to make sure that every time I load the Luminar FLEX plugin, I have the portrait workspace available to me. So I load the portrait workspace, and again, in the dropdown, I choose to set this as my default. Now, every time I launch Luminar FLEX, the portrait workspace is available to me. I'm not locked in. I can always switch to a different workspace, but that way I don't have to go through the steps of loading the portrait workspace every time I load the filter. Now I'm going to clear the workspace because I want to create one that's specific to my needs. I know I always like to start off with the Accent AI filter. I like to have access to AI Sky Enhancer. A little structure is always nice, and I like to use saturation and vibrance. I also find that I like to put a vignette in many of my images. As you can see, I'm developing a custom workspace just for my needs. I tend to shoot a lot of environmental portraits, so I find a few things are really helpful. Remove color cast is one of my go-to filters whenever I'm developing an image. And golden hour is really nice to give me that sunset type of look. So let's say that this is my go-to set of filters. I like it, but the workflow isn't quite right. I usually want to add my vignette at the very end. I can grab the vignette filter and just drag it down to the bottom. So when creating your own custom workspace, not only are you putting in the filters that you're going to use, you should put them in the order that you plan to use them. Now I'm ready to save this as my own custom workspace. I'll go back to the top and go to the drop-down and click on Save as New Workspace. I'm going to give it a name, which is going to be Abba's Default, and click on Save New Workspace. If we go back here to the drop-down, there it is, Abba's Default. Now, this isn't necessarily my default workspace until I actually set it as the default, and now every time I load the plugin, these filters are available to me in this order, and I can quickly start editing. Now, suppose I want to share this custom workspace. I want to send it to a friend, or maybe I want to move it to one of my machines. To find out where the workspaces are stored, you can go over to the File drop-down menu and select Show Workspaces folder. And in this folder are my custom workspaces. I already had created one called Accent AI, which if I wanted to, I can just always open up with the Accent AI filter there. And here is Abba's Default. And conversely, if somebody sent me one of their workspaces, I can simply drop it into the folder and it will appear in the dropdown. And speaking of custom workspaces, you can download additional workspaces from the Luminar Marketplace. It's as simple as finding a workspace that you like. Let's download the Fashion Portrait Workspace by Dixie Dixon. Now that the file is downloaded, I'll navigate to my Downloads folder. There's the workspace. It's a .lmws file. I'm going to go back over to Luminar FLEX, show my Workspaces folder. So I have my Workspaces folder, and I have my Downloads folder, and all I have to do is either copy and paste it in or just drag it over into the Luminar Workspaces folder. Once I've done that, I can switch back over to the Luminar FLEX plugin, And there we have Dixie Dixon's Workspace. Now, Workspaces not only save you time by letting you start editing your photos quicker, but by providing a guided workflow, you not only work faster, you also work smarter. Go ahead, take Workspaces for a spin.